Captain Jiho had been exploring space for over 20 years, but he had never seen readings like these before. The bridge of his ship buzzed with quiet activity as his crew worked at their stations. The blue glow from the holographic display lit up his weathered face as he studied the strange energy patterns coming from a distant star system. Lieutenant Minji sat at her communication desk, her fingers dancing across the controls. She had joined Jiho's crew only 2 years ago, fresh from the academy, but she was already one of their best officers. Her dark eyes reflected the concern she felt as she double-checked her equipment for the 3rd time. "Captain," she said, her voice steady despite her nervousness, "I've run these readings through every database we have. Nothing comes close to matching what we're seeing from the Sol system." The Sol system. Even the name sent a chill through the bridge crew. Every child in the Confederacy learned about it in school. It was the home of the humans, a species that had simply vanished from the galaxy 500,000 years ago. No one knew what happened to them. They were there one day, gone the next, leaving behind only empty worlds and ancient ruins. Commander. Hyun looked up from his tactical station, his brow furrowed with confusion. He was a big man with gentle eyes, the kind of person who preferred solving problems with words rather than weapons. But right now, his scanner readings were telling him something that made no sense at all. "Sir, I'm picking up structures in orbit, around the 3rd planet. The computer keeps classifying them as ships, but that's impossible. The energy signatures are stronger than our most advanced vessels." Jiho walked over to Hyun's station and peered at the display. The readings showed massive objects moving in precise patterns around a blue and green world. Earth, the humans had called it. According to every historical record they had, it should have been empty for 500,000 years. "Move us forward, but keep our distance," Jiho ordered, "and raise our shields. I don't like surprises." The ship glided through space toward the mysterious system. As they got closer, their sensors began picking up more and more details. What they saw left the entire crew speechless. Hundreds of ships floated in perfect formation around Earth. They were unlike anything the Confederacy had ever built. Where alien ships were bulky and functional, these vessels were sleek and beautiful, like someone had carved them from liquid metal and starlight. They moved with a grace that seemed almost alive, patrolling in patterns that were both complex and somehow natural. Science Officer Nari rushed to her station, her hands flying over the controls as she tried to make sense of what they were seeing. She was the youngest member of the senior crew, barely out of her 20s, but her mind was sharp as a laser blade. "This doesn't make any sense," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder and fear. "These ships should be nothing but space. Dust by now. Metal doesn't last 500,000 years in space. Solar radiation should have torn them apart. Meteor impacts should have destroyed them. But look at them. They're perfect." The alien crew watched in amazement as the human ships continued their endless dance around their dead world. Each vessel glowed with a soft, steady light that seemed to come from within. Their hulls showed no signs of age, no scratches from countless years in space, no wear from the harsh environment of the void. Jiho had seen many wonders in his years of exploration, but this was something else entirely. These weren't just old ships that had somehow survived. The energy readings showed they were more advanced than anything his people could build today. It was as if technology had moved backward over the past 500,000 years instead of forward. "How much power are they generating?" he asked quietly. Nari checked her readings again, certain she had made a mistake, but the numbers remained the same. "Sir, each of those ships is producing more energy than our entire fleet combined. If they wanted to, they could turn us into vapor without even trying." The bridge fell silent, except for the quiet hum of their own systems. Everyone understood what this meant. They were looking at technology that was far beyond their understanding, controlled by minds they couldn't even guess at. Were the ships still crewed by humans who had somehow lived for 500,000 years? Were they controlled by machines the humans had left behind, or was something else entirely watching them from within those gleaming hulls? Commander Hyun's tactical display suddenly lit up with new information. "Captain, they're scanning us. Deep scans going right through our shields like they're not even there." Jiho felt a cold knot form in his stomach. His ship's shields were military grade, designed to stop the most advanced scanning technology in the galaxy. If these ancient ships could see through them so easily, what else could they do? "Are they hostile?" he asked. "I don't know, sir. They're just watching us like they're trying to figure out what we are." Lieutenant Minji suddenly straightened at her station. "Sir, I'm detecting movement. 3 of the ships are breaking off from their patrol patterns. They're heading our way." The crew watched their screens as 3 of the mysterious vessels changed course and began moving toward them. They didn't rush or make threatening movements. Instead, they approached with the same graceful precision they had shown while patrolling, like dancers performing a routine they had practiced for centuries. Jiho made a decision that would change everything. "Hold our position. Don't power weapons, don't make any aggressive moves, let's see what they want." As the human ships drew closer, the alien crew could see them more clearly. The vessels were even more beautiful up close, their surfaces seeming to shift and flow like living metal. Strange symbols glowed along their hulls, writing in a language that had been dead for longer than most civilizations had existed. The 3 ships took positions around Jiho's vessel, not surrounding them in a threatening way, but more like escorts. They seemed to be waiting for something, though no one could guess what. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything went quiet. The human ships stopped moving and hung motionless in space, their mysterious glow pulsing gently like sleeping. Giants breathing in the darkness. Captain Jiho had no idea they were about to cross a line that had been drawn in space 500,000 years ago. His fleet moved forward slowly, their sensors focused on the mysterious human ships that continued their silent patrol around Earth. The alien crew watched with fascination as the ancient vessels glided through space with impossible grace. Then, everything changed in an instant. It started with a single pulse of light that spread outward from Earth like a ripple in a pond. The pulse passed through Jiho's fleet harmlessly, but the moment it touched them, something awakened. Every human ship in the vast orbital formation suddenly blazed with brilliant light. Warning signals that had been silent for longer than most civilizations had existed suddenly screamed to life. Lieutenant Minji gasped as her communication equipment went crazy. Red lights flashed across her console as dozens of frequencies came alive at once. The bridge filled with the sound of alarms as their own systems detected the sudden surge of energy from the human fleet. "Captain," she called out, her voice tight with fear. "Every single one of those ships just went active, all of them, at exactly the same time." Jiho felt his heart skip a beat as he watched the display. Hundreds of human vessels that had been moving in lazy patrol patterns suddenly snapped into combat formations. Their movements were so fast and precise that it looked like a choreographed dance. Except this dance was preparing for war. "Shields up now," Jiho shouted to his crew. "All defensive systems online." Commander Hyun's hands flew over his tactical controls, but what he saw on his screen made his blood run cold. Red targeting indicators appeared all around their fleet, showing that dozens of human ships had locked weapons onto them. The energy readings were unlike anything he had ever seen before. "Sir, we're completely surrounded," he reported, his voice barely steady. "I count at least 50 vessels in attack position. Their weapon systems are charging, and the power levels are off the charts." The bridge crew could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a storm. Everyone knew they were in terrible danger, but no one knew what to do about it. Their own weapons seemed like toys compared to what they were facing. That's when Lieutenant Minji's console lit up with an incoming transmission. She looked at her captain with wide eyes, hardly believing what she was seeing. "Sir, we're getting a message. It's coming from multiple ships at once, but it's synchronized perfectly. And, Captain, it's in our language. Perfect galactic standard." The bridge fell silent as Minji opened the channel. What came through the speakers was a voice unlike anything they had ever heard. It wasn't quite male or female, but something in between. It sounded ancient and wise, but also somehow caring, like a parent speaking to a child who had wandered too far from home. "Attention vessels of the Veltar Confederacy," the voice said, each word crystal clear. "You have entered the protective zone of the sanctuary world. State your intentions regarding the protected world and its systems." Jiho exchanged glances with his officers. How did these ships know who they were? How did they know their language? The galactic standard had been developed thousands of years after humanity had vanished. yet this voice spoke it, as if it had been using it for centuries. Commander Hyun's tactical display showed more bad news. "Captain, their weapons are still charging. The energy buildup is incredible. I've never seen anything like it. A single shot from any one of those ships could destroy our entire fleet. Science." Officer Nari had been running calculations on her computer, trying to understand what they were facing. When she looked up, her face was pale with shock. "Sir, this isn't just a defensive system. The coordination between all these ships is perfect. They're sharing information instantly, making decisions together. It's like they're all parts of one giant mind." She paused, checking her readings again to make sure she wasn't making a mistake. "Captain, the response time between the ships is impossible. They're communicating faster than light somehow. And the tactical patterns they're using, they're not from any military doctrine we know. They're completely new, like they've been developing and improving for hundreds of thousands of years." Ji-ho realized they weren't just facing old human technology that had somehow survived. They were confronting something that had been growing and learning for 500,000 years. Whatever intelligence controlled these ships had been watching the galaxy, studying every species, learning every language, and preparing for this moment. The voice spoke again, and this time there was a note of patience in it, like a teacher waiting for a student to answer a question. "Your vessels carry the energy signatures of exploration craft, not warships. Your crew shows elevated stress patterns consistent with scientific curiosity rather than hostile intent. However, you have not responded to our inquiry. Please state your purpose in this system." Lieutenant Minji looked at her captain, waiting for instructions. The alien crew could see that the human ships had moved into a perfect sphere around their fleet. Every possible escape route was blocked, and their sensors showed that more ships were moving into position from the far side of Earth. Commander Hyun wiped sweat from his forehead as he studied his display. "Sir, they could have destroyed us, already if they wanted to. The fact that we're still alive means they're giving us a chance to explain ourselves." Ji-ho nodded slowly. He had commanded ships for decades, and he had learned to read dangerous situations. This intelligence, whatever it was, had power beyond imagination, but it was also showing restraint. It could have attacked without warning, but instead it was asking questions. The captain stepped forward and spoke clearly into the communication system. "This is Captain Ji-ho of the Confederacy exploration vessel Bright Star. We detected unusual energy signatures from this system and came to investigate. We mean no harm to Earth or any of its systems. We are scientists and explorers, not conquerors." The response came immediately, as if the intelligence had been analyzing his words even as he spoke them. "Your biometric patterns indicate truthfulness, Captain Ji-ho. Your vessel's weapons are powered down, and your crew's stress responses are consistent with peaceful intentions. However, you are not the first visitors to this system. Others have come with different purposes. We must ensure you understand the nature of what you have found." The human ships began to move again, but this time their formation shifted from aggressive to something more like a protective escort. The weapons were still charged and ready, but the immediate threat seemed to have passed. Nari looked up from her science station with amazement in her eyes. "Captain, I don't think we're dealing with just advanced technology anymore. This intelligence has been active for 500,000 years. It's been watching, learning, and evolving. We're not just talking to machines left behind by humans. We're talking to something that has become far more than what its creators originally intended." The moment Captain Ji-ho agreed to board the human vessel, he felt a strange tingling sensation wash over his body. 1 second he was standing on his own bridge, and the next he found himself in a place that seemed to exist beyond the normal rules of reality. The chamber they now stood in was unlike anything any of them had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft, warm light. The floor beneath their feet felt solid, yet it rippled like water with each step they took. Above them, the ceiling stretched impossibly high, filled with swirling patterns of light that looked like captured starlight. Lieutenant Minji reached out to touch one of the crystal walls and gasped as her hand passed right through it, yet she could still feel its warmth. "This shouldn't be possible," she whispered. "The walls are solid and not solid at the same time." Science Officer Nari pulled out her scanner, but the device just beeped in confusion. Every reading it gave was different from the last. The physics here don't match anything we understand. It's like they've found a way to bend the basic rules of the universe. Commander Hyun looked around the chamber with wonder and fear. As a military man, he was used to understanding his environment, but this place made him feel like a child trying to understand advanced mathematics. That's when the voice spoke again. But this time it seemed to come from everywhere at once. The crystal walls resonated with each word, creating a sound that was felt as much as heard. "Welcome aboard the vessel Eternal Watch," the voice said. "We are the custodians. The final creation of humanity before they moved beyond the need for physical form." Captain Jiho stepped forward, trying to maintain his composure despite the impossible surroundings. "What do you mean by final creation? What happened to the humans?" The air in the chamber began to shimmer, and suddenly they were surrounded by holographic images that showed the history of humanity's last days. They saw humans working frantically in laboratories and factories, building something massive and complex. The images showed Earth covered with construction projects that stretched into space. "Our creators knew their time in physical form was ending," the custodian explained. "They had evolved beyond the need for bodies made of flesh and bone, but before they transcended, they wanted to ensure that the galaxy would not be left unprotected." IDQ. Holographic display changed to show the moment of humanity's departure. Billions of humans simply faded away like morning mist, leaving behind only their greatest creation, the custodians. Lieutenant Minji watched the images with tears in her eyes. "They gave up their physical existence to create you?" "Not gave up," the custodian corrected gently. "They chose to become something greater, but they loved this galaxy too much to leave it without guardians. We are their love made manifest, their care for all life given form and purpose." Science Officer Nari studied the holographic records with fascination. "You said you've been protecting galactic civilization. What does that mean exactly?" The chamber filled with new images, showing countless worlds and civilizations throughout the galaxy's history. Nari recognized some of them from her studies, but many were completely unknown to her. "For 500,000 years, we have watched and protected," the custodian explained. "We do not interfere directly in the natural development of species, but we prevent extinction-level events that would end civilizations before they have a chance to grow." The images showed asteroids being quietly redirected away from populated worlds. They showed plagues being stopped by the sudden appearance of medical research that led to cures. They showed dying suns being stabilized through mysterious solar flares that somehow restored their energy. Commander Hyun's jaw dropped as he recognized some of the events. The Great Plague of Keith Prime. Every history book says it ended when scientists made a breakthrough discovery, but you're saying, "We guided their research," the custodian confirmed. "We provided the inspiration, the lucky accidents that led them to the cure. The Keth people never knew they were being helped, but millions of lives were saved." Captain Jiho felt a chill run down his spine as he began to understand the scope of what they were hearing. The asteroid that almost hit our homeworld 3,000 years ago, the one that mysteriously changed course at the last moment. "We redirected it," the custodian said simply. "Your people celebrated it as a miracle. In truth, it was human love reaching across the centuries to protect you." The holographic display showed dozens of similar interventions throughout the galaxy's history, wars that ended suddenly when key leaders had changes of heart, natural disasters that were mysteriously less devastating than they should have been, technological breakthroughs that came at exactly the right moment to save civilizations from collapse. Lieutenant Minji looked around at her fellow officers, seeing the same amazement and gratitude in their eyes that she felt in her heart. "You've been protecting all of us this entire time, and we never knew." "That was the point," the custodian replied. "Humanity understood that true help comes without seeking credit or thanks. They wanted each species to believe in their own strength and abilities. Our interventions were designed to look like natural events or lucky coincidences." Science Officer Nari shook her head in wonder. "But why? Why would humans care so much about species they had never even met?" The custodian's voice took on a tone of deep emotion that surprised them all. Because that is what made humanity special. They understood that intelligence and consciousness are precious gifts that should be protected wherever they arise. They believed that every species has something unique to contribute to the galaxy. The chamber filled with images of human culture from their final days. They saw humans of all ages working together on the Custodian project, sacrificing their own comfort and resources to build something that would protect strangers they would never meet. Your species, the Veltar, almost went extinct in a supervolcanic eruption 200,000 years ago, the Custodian continued. We subtly influenced your ancestors to move away from the danger zone. The Keth nearly destroyed themselves in a civil war 50,000 years ago, until key leaders suddenly found the wisdom to make peace. Commander Hyun sat down heavily on what appeared to be a crystal chair that formed beneath him as he needed it. Our entire civilization exists because of human intervention. Not intervention, the Custodian corrected. Love, humanity's greatest. Achievement was not their technology or their knowledge. It was their ability to care for others without expecting anything in return. That love became us, and through us, it has protected the galaxy for 500,000 years. The holographic displays faded, leaving them in the gentle glow of the crystal chamber. Captain Jiho looked at his officers and saw his own emotions reflected. In their faces, gratitude, wonder, and a deep sense of responsibility. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. The Custodian's voice carried a note of anticipation. "Now, Captain Jiho, we must determine if the galaxy is ready for humanity's final gift." The great assembly hall that the Custodians created for the meeting was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Representatives from 12 different species sat in a perfect circle, each group maintaining careful distance from their traditional enemies. The air hummed with tension as ancient grudges and old conflicts threatened to boil over. Captain Jiho sat with his fellow Veltar officers, but his eyes constantly moved around the room, studying the faces of beings he had only read about in history books. Admiral Sora of the Keth sat directly across from him, her scaled features showing the wisdom of someone who had lived through 3 wars. To his left, General Dohyun represented the warrior tribes, his massive frame and battle scars telling the story of countless conflicts. The Custodian's voice filled the chamber, somehow reaching each species in their own language while maintaining perfect unity of meaning. "For 500,000 years we have protected this galaxy," it began, "but our creators always intended for us to be temporary guardians. The time has come to pass humanity's greatest treasures to those who will use them wisely." Lieutenant Minji shifted nervously in her seat as she watched the various species react to these words. Some leaned forward with excitement, others whispered among themselves, and a few looked openly skeptical. However, the Custodian continued, "These gifts cannot be given lightly. Power without wisdom leads to destruction. Technology without compassion becomes a weapon against the innocent. You must prove that you are ready for humanity's legacy." That's when Commander Junho of the Terran Empire stood up, his red skin flushed with anger. The Terrans were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors who believed that strength was the only thing that mattered. Junho's voice boomed across the chamber. "Why should we prove anything to machines created by a dead species?" he demanded. "We have fleets, we have weapons, we have the power to take what we want. These tests are an insult to our strength." Several other Terran representatives nodded in agreement, while species that had suffered under Terran aggression looked uncomfortable. Captain Jiho could see the old patterns of fear and hatred beginning to emerge, but Science Officer Nari had been studying the holographic displays that surrounded them, showing the details of the challenges they would face. She stood up slowly, her voice calm but clear. "Commander Junho, with respect, I don't think you understand what these tests really are," she said. "I've analyzed the scenarios, and they're not about military power or technological superiority. They're about something much more difficult." She gestured to the displays around them. "Look at the first challenge. There's a star system where the sun is dying, and 3 billion people are going to die with it. But saving them requires Keth engineering knowledge to build the solar stabilizers, Terran industrial capacity to manufacture them quickly, and Veltar medical expertise to treat the radiation poisoning that's already affecting the population. Admiral Sora studied the data with interest. No single species could handle this alone, she observed. Even working together, it would be incredibly difficult. Commander Hyun had been examining the military aspects of the challenges. These scenarios aren't about conquest or domination, he realized. They're about cooperation. Species that have been enemies for centuries would have to work together as equals. General Do-hyun, despite representing the warrior clans, showed surprising wisdom. In battle, you learn to respect your enemies. Sometimes the ones you fight today become your allies tomorrow. Perhaps these tests are trying to teach us the same lesson. The second challenge appeared on the displays. A plague spreading across multiple worlds, threatening to wipe out several civilizations. The cure required resources and knowledge from 6 different species, including some that had never spoken to each other peacefully. Lieutenant Minji watched as representatives from the different species began to study the problems together. Some, for the first time in their lives. "It's amazing," she whispered to Captain Jiho. "Look at them. They're actually talking to each other instead of arguing." But not everyone was willing to cooperate. Commander Junho and several other aggressive leaders continued to insist that they should simply take what they wanted by force. They began forming their own group, separate from the others. "We don't need their cooperation," Junho declared. "The Taran Empire has conquered half the galaxy on our own. We can solve these problems with strength and determination." The custodians' response was immediate and chilling. "Commander Junho, you may attempt the challenges using only force if you wish. However, be aware that failure means the death of billions of innocent beings. These are not simulations. These are real crises happening right now in distant parts of the galaxy." The chamber fell silent as the full weight of those words sank in. These weren't just tests or games. Real people were dying while they debated, and their decisions would determine who lived and who died. Admiral Sora stood up and walked over to General Do-hyun, extending her hand in a gesture of friendship that shocked everyone in the room. The Keth and the warrior clans had been enemies for over 1,000 years. "General," she said simply, "my people have engineering skills that could save those dying worlds. Your people have the manufacturing capability to build what we design. Will you work with me?" Do-hyun looked at her outstretched hand for a long moment. Everyone in the chamber held their breath, knowing that this moment could change the course of galactic history. Finally, he reached out and shook her hand firmly. "Admiral, it would be an honor to work with the Keith engineers. Our strength, combined with your wisdom, could accomplish great things." Their handshake seemed to break a dam of old hatred and suspicion. Across the chamber, representatives from different species began approaching each other, forming working groups for the first time in centuries. Science Officer Nari found herself working alongside a Taran scientist who, despite his species' reputation for aggression, turned out to be brilliant and surprisingly gentle. Commander Hyun discovered that a former enemy had tactical insights that perfectly complemented his own strategies. Captain Jiho watched it all with amazement. This is what they wanted all along, he realized, speaking to Lieutenant Minji. The humans didn't just want to give us their technology. They wanted to change us, to make us better than we were. As the working groups formed and began tackling the challenges, something remarkable happened. Ancient enemies started to see each other as allies. Species that had never trusted anyone began sharing their most closely guarded secrets for the greater good. The first star system was saved through unprecedented cooperation between 5 different species. The plague was stopped when 7 former enemies worked together to distribute the cure across multiple worlds. Each success built more trust and cooperation. Admiral Sora looked around the chamber with wonder as she watched natural enemies helping each other solve problems that had seemed impossible just hours before. "You know," she said to General Do-hyun, "I think humanity's greatest gift wasn't their technology at all. It was showing us that we could be better than our fears and hatred. They're still teaching us, even after 500,000 years." 6 months had passed since the Great Assembly first gathered around Earth, and the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have imagined. Captain Jiho stood in what had once been humanity's greatest command center, now restored to its full glory by the custodians. The massive chamber stretched out before them, its walls lined with displays showing every inhabited world in the galaxy. Around him stood beings who just months ago had been sworn enemies. Admiral Sora of the Keth worked side by side with General Do-hyun of the warrior clans, their heads bent together as they studied star charts and discussed patrol routes. Commander Hyun, who had once been just the tactical officer on Jiho's exploration ship, now wore the insignia of the Joint Confederacy, Fleet Commander, a position that would have been impossible before the trials began. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been arguments, setbacks, and moments when it seemed like old hatreds would tear apart everything they had built. But each time conflict arose, the memory of what they had accomplished together during the trials pulled them back from the brink. Lieutenant Minji, now serving as the primary communications coordinator for all 12 species, watched her screens with amazement as messages flowed between worlds that had never spoken to each other before. Trade agreements, scientific exchanges, and cultural programs were being established at a rate that would have been unthinkable just a year ago. "Captain," she called out, her voice filled with excitement, "we're getting reports from the outer Rim colonies. The Keth-Taran Joint Medical Mission has successfully eliminated the Red Fever Plague from 3 more worlds. That's 15 worlds saved in the past month alone." The custodian's presence filled the chamber, its voice carrying the warm satisfaction of a teacher watching students exceed all expectations. "You have accomplished something remarkable," it announced to the assembled representatives. "In 6 months you have achieved what we thought might take decades. You have not merely worked together, you have become something new," as if responding to the custodian's words. Massive sections of Earth's surface began to open like flower petals. Structures that had been hidden beneath the planet's crust for 500,000 years slowly rose into view. These weren't just buildings or machines, but repositories of knowledge that represented the entire accumulated wisdom of human civilization. Science Officer Nari pressed her face against the viewing window, her breath fogging the glass as she watched the incredible sight unfold. "Captain, the energy readings from those structures, they're not just storage facilities, they're active research centers. The custodians have been continuing human research all this time, developing new technologies and solutions." Commander Hyun's tactical displays lit up with information as Earth's defense systems fully revealed themselves. What they had seen before was just a tiny fraction of the planet's true capabilities. Weapons that could protect entire star systems, shields that could deflect asteroid impacts, and communication networks that could connect every world in the galaxy instantly. But the military applications, impressive as they were, paled in comparison to what came next. Admiral Sora gasped as medical databases began downloading directly into the Confederacy's shared networks. Centuries of her people had suffered from a genetic disorder that caused their scales to weaken with age. The cure had just appeared in their medical computers, along with treatments for thousands of other diseases that had plagued various species for millennia. "This is impossible," she whispered, tears streaming down her scaled cheeks. "My grandmother died from scale rot when I was young. My daughter won't have to watch her children suffer the same fate." General Do-hyun, the massive warrior who had spent his life fighting, found himself staring at agricultural technology that could turn the desert worlds of his people into fertile gardens. "My tribes have struggled for resources for thousands of years," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Wars have been fought over patches of fertile ground. This could end all of that. The medical databases were just the beginning." Engineering knowledge that could rebuild dying worlds flowed into Keth computers. Energy technologies that could power civilizations for millions of years downloaded into Taran systems. Each species received not just what they needed most, but what they had never dared to dream was possible. Lieutenant Minji wiped tears from her eyes as she watched her people's greatest dreams becoming reality. "Sir, we're receiving confirmation from the homeworld. The atmospheric processors are working. The toxic clouds that have covered our skies for centuries are starting to clear. We might actually see natural sunlight again." But the custodian wasn't finished. The greatest gift was yet to come. "What you have received is indeed precious," it said, "but it is not humanity's greatest legacy. Their true achievement was not in the knowledge they accumulated, but in the wisdom they showed by creating us. The chamber filled with a warm, golden light as the custodian's true nature was revealed. It wasn't just a machine or even an artificial intelligence. It was something far more profound, the living embodiment of humanity's love for all life in the galaxy. We are not mere guardians or servants, the custodian explained. We are the promise that humanity made to the future. We are their commitment, that no species should face extinction alone, that no world should fall into darkness without hope, that no civilization should have to choose between survival and morality. Captain Jiho felt a deep sense of understanding wash over him. You're not just protecting us, you're teaching us to protect each other. Exactly, the custodian replied. And now you have learned that lesson well enough to no longer need teachers. The assembled representatives looked at each other with new understanding. They had thought they were being tested to receive humanity's technology, but the real test had been whether they could become worthy of humanity's trust. Science Officer Nari spoke up, her voice filled with reverence. The humans knew they were leaving, but they couldn't bear the thought of leaving the galaxy unprotected. So they didn't just build guardians, they built teachers who would help us become guardians ourselves. Admiral Sora nodded slowly. They achieved immortality by making sure their values would live on through us. General Dohyun, the warrior, understood perhaps better than anyone. In my culture, we believe that a fighter only truly dies when there is no one left to carry on their battles. Humanity's battle was for the protection of all life. As long as we continue that fight, they live on. The custodian's voice carried deep satisfaction. You understand perfectly. We will remain as advisors when needed, but the galaxy's protection now rests in your hands. The fleet that has guarded Earth for 500,000 years will join your confederation, not as masters, but as partners. As Captain Jiho looked out at the stars through the command center's vast windows, he saw human ships taking new positions alongside vessels from every species in the Confederacy. The sight filled him with a sense of purpose he had never felt before. Humanity's greatest victory hadn't been conquering death or transcending physical existence. Their triumph was in creating a legacy that would make the galaxy better long after they were gone. They had planted seeds of cooperation and compassion that had grown into something beautiful and strong. The galaxy was no longer a collection of separate species competing for resources and survival. It had become a family united by the values that humanity had died to preserve and the custodians had lived to teach. And in that unity, humanity had found their truest form of immortality.